So those of you that are fans of performance Cadillacs will probably be familiar with the V series. And, well, quite a long time ago, Cadillac introduced a model called the Cts-V, which was a big, comfortable sedan with a big, whopping supercharged V8 under the hood. Now, the last generation of that model was an absolute beast, over 600 horsepower, a manual transmission. This thing was truly incredible, but it died a few years ago, and we really haven't seen anything on the same performance caliber, well, since. I mean, we've had a couple of fast-ish Cadillacs, but nothing with the crazy fire-breathing supercharged V8. That's changing today, guys, because the new CT5-V, wait till you hear the performance numbers. That's going to come up later in this video, but first, let's talk about some of the highlights between the CT4 and the CT5. Now, the CT4 is a smaller of the two. It's kind of 3 Series C-Class sized, and then the CT5 is more like 5 Series E-Class sized. The coolest part of these vehicles, in my opinion, is they both are available with a Tremec 6-speed manual. Who would have thought that in 2021, we would be getting a high-performance sedan from Cadillac with a manual transmission. In an age where everybody is killing off the stick shift, Cadillac is bringing it back. I love to see that. It's got a new twin-disc clutch with no lift shifting. So in theory, you can just leave your foot planted in that throttle, shift between gears, and shoot down the road. Active rev matching by a console-mounted toggle switch as well. So you can look like a high-performance driver, even if you're just driving to the grocery store, get those perfect rev matches. Now, if you don't want to shift your own gears, there's also an available 10-speed automatic transmission. Moving a little bit further back, in the rear of the vehicle, you'll find an electronic limited slip rear differential. It's been upgraded to improve on-track reliability. There's also suspension refinement. So Cadillac has a system called the Magnetic Ride Control. This is MagRide 4.0. It's the world's fastest reactive suspension technology, according to Cadillac, and it's supposed to be tuned for both daily driving and track capability. Basically, fluid-filled system. And then when you run an electrical charge through it, it can tighten up or loosen up at the blink of an eye, maybe even faster, to adapt to various situations as you're driving either on track or on the road. Pretty cool stuff. These new models also have chassis and steering refinements for better handling on the track. They also have the largest performance disc brakes ever fitted to a Cadillac. On the CT5-V Blackwing, the optional brakes are supposed to be incredibly powerful and big. Customizable digital gauge cluster on both of these. GM says the automatic transmission version went through 24 hours of continuous track driving. I would love to be that chap that went through that day, because that must have been super fun. And the manual has gone through 12 hours of continuous track driving. Not really sure why the automatic got more love, but that's how it went. And there's also a performance data recorder available as an option. Basically, a camera and telemetry data so you can show your friends how you kick butt at that track day. Now let's talk about some of the styling and aero tweaks over the CT4 and CT5 models. New mesh grille, so one of the iconic design elements of the V is back. The mesh grille just looks cool. It looks purposeful. Larger secondary grills for auxiliary charge coolers, and smaller lower grills direct air over the front brakes as well. Front splitter is there to reduce lift, while a rear spoiler is to improve downforce. There's underbody airflow panels just to make it super slippery, and then you've got air deflectors for the front wheels to improve drag. However, they can be removed to improve brake cooling if you want. All right, now let's dive into some of the details that separate the CT4 from the top dog CT5. The CT4-V Blackwing uses a 3.6-liter twin-turbo V6. It develops 472 horsepower and 445 pound-feet of torque. Some seriously impressive power numbers from a relatively compact vehicle. Currently, you can buy a CT4-V. The non-Blackwing uses a 2.7-liter four-cylinder. So, by getting the Blackwing option, you get a lot of horsepower extra. That's up 147 horsepower and 64 pound-feet of torque versus the standard CT4-V. The old ATS-V, if you remember before they kind of changed their naming, the ATS-V also used a 3.6-liter V6, similar to what you'd find in the Blackwing. Now, the new version of the Blackwing is pretty much on par with that old model. It makes about 8 more horsepower, but the same torque as the old ATS-V. Luckily, the 6-speed manual transmission is standard. That's right, standard in the CT4 Blackwing. 10-speed is an option. The top speed, any guesses? GM estimates 189 miles per hour, 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds, according to General Motors. Now, there are some differences between the new CT4-V and that older ATS-V. Not much more power, but there's a new air intake, and the restriction is supposed to be improved by 39% versus the old ATS-V, and then GM has really focused on the responsiveness of the engine. There's a manifold integrated water-to-air cooling system that improves the throttle response, titanium connecting rods on the manual transmission only, which is pretty interesting, and revised crankshaft that counterweights the reduced main rod bearing reciprocating loads. Cool. There's also improved oil cooling to handle more intense track conditions. Brakes and tires, 15-inch rotors on the Cts-V Blackwings in the front and 13.4-inch rotors in the rear. Brembo's 6-piston front calipers, 4-piston in the back, and Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires, 265 front, 275 rear on the 18-inch wheels. Now pricing, this is interesting. It really isn't all that expensive. $59,990 starting. Including destination. Like, that's pretty reasonable for 472 horsepower and 445 pound-feet of torque. But let's talk about the top dog, the one that everyone is going to want to hear about, the CT5-V Blackwing. We aren't talking about a V6 when we step up to the CT5. No. This vehicle has 6.2 liters of supercharged V8 power. 668 horsepower, 659 pound-feet of torque. This is Cadillac's most powerful car ever. Think about that. This is a sedan with a manual transmission, 668 horsepower, 659 pound-feet of torque with all the luxuries that you'd expect from a Cadillac. Now, the standard CT5-V has a 3-liter twin-turbo V6, but the Blackwing offers 308 more horsepower and 254 pound-feet more torque than the standard CT5-V. This is cool because the old CTS-V, the one that, everybody was just crazed about a number of years ago, that also had a supercharged V8. That was a CT4 V8, but the Blackwing manages 28 more horsepower than that old model and 29 more foot-pounds of torque, which is pretty cool. Top speed, according to GM, is over 200 miles per hour. 0 to 60, 3.7 seconds. Interestingly enough, that is only slightly quicker than its smaller brother, the CT4 Blackwing. The air intake and airflow has been improved 46% over the previous CTS-V. It uses a high-output 1.7-liter 4-lobe Eaton supercharger. Smaller diameter rotors help generate more boost earlier in the RPM band for better responsiveness. Cadillac's really going for the ultimate in kind of driving experience with the throttle responsiveness and the driving experience. It's got stronger aluminum cylinder heads and lightweight titanium intake valves. This is pretty cool stuff, guys. I mean, I don't know if you're excited about this design, but to have this kind of performance with a manual transmission is really cool. Now, both of these vehicles are going to be rear-wheel drive, so we'll have to see how they put the power to the ground in the real world. It's got 15.7-inch front brake rotors, 14.7-inch rear brake rotors. The rotors on this car are bigger than a lot of wheels from cars not that long ago, actually. Brembo 6-piston front calipers and 4-piston rear calipers, Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires, and then a monster 305 width tires on the rear on the 19-inch wheels. But the cool part about this really isn't all that expensive compared to some of its German rivals. $84,990 starting, including destination. Not all that crazy. Now, there are a ton of details that we could dive into when it comes to the different trims. For example, there are 3 basic models, the base, the mid-level, and the up-level. Those have different interior appointments and technologies. They also have standard wireless CarPlay, standard Android Auto. I mean, they're still Cadillacs. They're still built to be comfortable. They're still built to really envelop you as you drive down the road. AKG premium audio system with 14 speakers in the CT4 or 15 speakers in the CT5. And then, you've got a very unique design compared to the Germans. I think overall the exterior and interior really work. Now, the question I have, supercharged V8, 6.2 liters, is this going to make its way into the Corvette? Because, as you recall, the Corvette has been redesigned very recently. It's a brand new mid-engine model. It's got a naturally aspirated V8, but are we going to see the supercharged power plant from the CT5 make its way into the C8 Corvette? I think we might. I really do think we might, because historically the Z06 and the Z01s have been hopped up versions with superchargers. We'll see if that's true on the new C8. Well, let me know what you think of these cars in the comments section below. Super stoked about these models. And as always, this is Tommy with the Fastlane Car. Check out tflcar.com for the latest and greatest in new vehicle reviews.